Hi, my name is Eric. This is another video designed for beginning level policy debaters. In this video, we will focus on keeping a debate round organized. First, let's talk about a couple of reasons why we should keep a debate round organized. First of all, there's something in debate called the burden of rejoinder. This basically means that in any given debate round, a debate member is supposed to answer the opponent's arguments. If they fail to answer an opponent's argument, that argument is considered conceded. In other words, that argument is considered true for the sake of the debate round. This means that if one or two arguments are not addressed by any given team, that can have a great effect on whether or not they win or lose a debate round. Giving the other team arguments is not a good way to win a debate, and keeping a debate round organized is one way that we make sure that we answer all of the arguments from our opponents. Another reason it's important to keep a debate round organized is because of the overall amount of information in a debate round. There are a lot of arguments that are happening in a debate round, and it's important that we can keep track of those arguments. Another reason that it's important to keep a debate round organized is because it is being judged. The person who's watching the debate needs to understand why you think you've won the debate round. If you are not organized and your arguments are confusing, or the judge can't tell which arguments you're trying to answer, that gives the judge more room to intervene in the decision. This means that they can decide what they think you're trying to say if you're not clear in telling them exactly what you're trying to do. This means that keeping a debate round organized is a way to ensure that the judge cannot intervene and make a decision that does not accurately reflect the arguments that you've made in the debate round. Another reason that it's important to keep a debate round organized is because it is a team debate activity. By you and your partner being on the same page, you can create a narrative that makes sense and is consistent for the judge to vote on. If you and your partner are not on the same page, that can be very confusing for a judge. Having an organized debate allows your partner to understand the arguments that you're making and carry those forward in their own speech. By being organized, debate team members can work better together and present their arguments more clearly. First and foremost, if you want to be organized during a debate round, you need to understand the format of a debate round. You need to know what the speeches are and what order they will be given in, how long those speeches are, and who will be giving cross-examination questions. All of these things are essential to know before the debate round starts. So if you haven't already done so, make sure you know what the format is for the debate that you will be doing. In order to talk about how to keep a debate round organized, I'd like to focus on some of the concepts that we use in order to do so. The first organizational concept that I'd like to talk about is called road mapping. Road mapping is something that you do before your speech begins. This is basically when you tell your audience in which order you will be going over the positions in the debate round. Remember, a position is tied to either the affirmative's on case or the off case positions that are presented by the negative team. The affirmative will always have an on case with stock issues to prepare their case. The negative can introduce off-case positions like topicality, disadvantages, counterplans, and critiques in order to defend their turf. Another thing that we do in a debate round to keep it organized is called internal signposting. Internal signposting is exactly like it sounds. Within a speech, we need to tell the judge when we are transferring from one piece of paper to the next. For instance, if I've finished answering the disadvantage and I want to move on to, say, the counterplan, all I would need to do is say, now that I'm done with the disadvantage, let's turn to the counterplan. Again, it sounds simple, but this is a very effective way to ensure that the judge is following the arguments that you're making and putting them in the right place on their flow sheets. This will help to keep the debate round organized and help to ensure that the judge will make a decision that accurately reflects the arguments that you were trying to make. Another type of internal signposting will happen when you're transitioning from one argument to the next. Once I've finished answering, for instance, the link of the disadvantage, I might want to turn to the uniqueness. I would do so by just letting the judge know that I'm moving on to the next argument. Basically, with internal signposting, I'm trying to get the judge to put their pen on the right place on the flow sheet in order to align my argument with my opponent's argument. If I don't tell the judge exactly where to put the arguments, they might put it in a place that I didn't expect, and that might wreak havoc on my overall strategy. Another concept that we use to keep a debate round organized is called line-by-line debating. Essentially, what we're saying here is that we will start from the top of the flow sheet and work our way down to the bottom of the flow sheet. So we'll start with the first argument that our opponent made, answer it, then move on to the next argument they made, answer it, then move on to the next argument they made, and answer it. By following the order of the previous speech, we ensure that the judge can keep our arguments aligned with the arguments our opponent is making. One of the worst things that you can do in a debate round is just get up and make arguments in one place, then another place, and then come back to the other place. This is very confusing. So please make sure that when you're debating, you are answering the arguments in the order that your opponents made them in their previous speech. In line-by-line debating, it's also important to recognize that we will answer all of the arguments on one position before we move to the next position. So for instance, if there's a disadvantage and a counterplan, we'll start from the top of the disadvantage first, answer all of the arguments in order, and then we'll transition to the counterplan and start at the top of that flow sheet. That ensures that we're answering all of the arguments that our opponent has made and keeping it organized for the judge. Another concept that we use in debate rounds, in order to keep it organized, is called refutation. Refutation is essentially telling the judge and their opponents exactly what argument we are answering. We do this in a 5-step process. The first step is to tell the opponents and our judges what argument we're answering. So we might first say, our opponent makes the argument that, and we tell the judge what number that argument was and on what flow sheet they can find it. After we've identified which argument we're answering, we make our counterclaim. In other words, we make the argument in opposition to theirs. After we tell the judge succinctly what our argument is, we defend it with evidence. That's the third step. Usually we would read a card by an author who is an expert in our subject area to reinforce the argument we're making. If we don't have a card or an expert to defend it, we would provide some kind of real-world examples that could substitute as that evidence. After we provide the evidence, the fourth step is to provide reasoning, which is explaining why that evidence and the counterclaim that we've made go together. What is the value that ties those two things together and allows our counterclaim to be proven by our evidence? After that, the final step is to impact the argument. What does it mean overall in the debate round? What does it mean for whether we're winning the debate round or how we're answering their arguments? These 5 steps of refutation can help you to stay organized in a debate round. When discussing organization in a debate round, it's also important to think about how we utilize evidence. When reading evidence, just like any other argument, we will number those arguments in the debate round to keep them organized. However, in future speeches, when we talk about the evidence that's been read before, there's something that we need to do in order to refer to that evidence. First, we need to talk about where that evidence came from, or which argument in the argument chain that it came from. Second, we need to identify that evidence by the author's last name, as well as the year that it was published. This handle essentially is how we carry forward evidence and refer to that evidence for the remainder of the debate. It's important to note that once a piece of evidence has been read in a debate round, we don't need to reread that evidence in the future speeches. Instead, we can refer to that evidence by calling the name of the author as well as the year that that evidence was written. By calling out the name of the author and the year that it was written, we are referring back to a previous speech and pulling that evidence forward. Now, instead of rereading that evidence, we can explain that evidence in our own words and compare and contrast that evidence with our opponent's evidence. There are 2 basic ways that we can refer to evidence that has been read in previous speeches. The first is extending. When we say that we are extending a piece of evidence, we are referring to pulling that evidence forward on the position that it was originally referred to. For instance, if we read an argument on the disadvantage in the previous speech and we want to refer to that argument in another speech, we would say extend the blank evidence from the 1 in C. So for instance, we might say extend the Mag in 17 evidence from the 1 in C. This would tell the audience that they should look to the column, the 1 in C column, to find that piece of evidence to understand what that argument was. Now, instead of rereading it, we can explain it and talk about how it is important for that debate round. The second way that we can refer to evidence from a previous speech is by cross-applying evidence. Cross-applying means that we're taking an argument that was read in a previous speech on a different position and cross-applying it to a new position. So for instance, if we made an argument on case in the 1NC and we want to cross-apply that into the 2NC onto the dishad, we would do that simply by saying cross-apply the evidence from the 1NC on case, which was the MAG and 17 evidence. By saying cross-apply, the judge knows that they need to look to a different flow sheet to find that argument in order to cross-apply it to the new flow sheet that you're talking about. So again, extending an argument means that you're taking an argument from a previous speech on the same position and moving it into a new speech. Cross-applying means that you're taking an argument from an entirely different position and cross-applying it onto a new position. Please note that extending and cross-applying arguments can refer to all types of arguments, not just arguments that used evidence as their basis. Another important organizational term in a debate round is called a conceded argument. A conceded argument is any argument that the other team did not answer. In other words, if you made an argument in your first speech and the other team failed to respond to that argument in their next speech, then you can extend that argument as a conceded argument. This is very important in debate rounds because it is assumed that if an argument is not answered, it is true for the sake of the debate round. Conceded arguments can be very powerful because the other team has admitted that they are true. So you can use these arguments to disrupt the narrative of the other team and/or build the narrative that you need to win the debate round. Again, a conceded argument is an argument that is unanswered by the other team. Another important organizational concept in a debate round is team consistency. It is extremely important that you and your partner are telling the same story in order to win the debate round. This means that you should utilize preparation time in order to compare your notes with your partners, as well as to discuss the strategy that you will use to answer the arguments that you're going to make. This is very important again because if you and your partner are not making the same arguments, it can cause contradictions in your story. This can make it very difficult for a judge to believe your story and therefore vote for you in a debate round. Another term that we use in debate rounds to keep the debate round organized is called kicking out. Kicking out of a position basically means that you're indicating to the judge that an argument that you had previously pursued is no longer an argument that you will continue to use. For instance, if you brought up a topicality argument in the 1NC against the affirmatives plan text, but realized later that they actually did meet the topicality standard, you could tell the judge that you are kicking out of topicality. This again means that you are no longer pursuing this argument for the debate round. This can help clear the path for the judge to understand exactly what your strategy is, especially in the final rebuttal. One of the absolutely most important skills that you can have in a debate round to keep it organized are flowing skills. I've already created a video for flowing skills, so if you haven't already watched that video, please do so now so that you can understand how important flowing is to keeping a debate round organized. The last thing I'd like to talk about in terms of keeping a debate round organized is how you prepare your evidence. Research is a foundation for debate, but you have to make sure that your research is organized before the debate round starts. Everybody can tell you who's ever debated that time moves faster in a debate round, so every moment and every second that you can save will be helpful. If you have your evidence filed and sorted, then you can use and find that evidence quicker during a debate round. For instance, I might have an affirmative file and a negative file. In my affirmative file, I would have my harms cards, my inherency cards, and my solvency cards clearly labeled and numbered and put in order. That way, if I needed to find a solvency card, for instance, I would read through my table of contents and I could find my solvency card very quickly. The same thing is true for the negative. You can organize your negative files into the different off-case positions as well as the different on-case positions that you might be attacking. So you might have a spending disadvantage, for instance, and all of the arguments and cards that you have relevant to that would be in that file. They would also be separated by link, uniqueness, and impact. All of the off-case positions have similar organizing procedures, so if you don't already understand those, please watch the negative strategy video as well as the affirmative strategy video in order to understand how those files can be created. Again, it's important to note that the more work you do with your research and filing and organizing it before the debate round, the easier it will be to utilize during a debate round, and therefore the more organized you can be. Keeping a debate round organized is a lot harder than it sounds. Some of these tools will definitely help you to provide that direction. However, the only way that you can truly be organized is from practice, practice, practice. The more experience you get, the easier it will be to organize a debate round. So keep practicing and don't be alarmed if you don't get it right the first time. Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully, it will give you some of the tools you need to become a more organized and a more successful debater.